Hey dads, this holiday season, I want to take a moment to talk about the fact that moms often don't get holidays. They tend to bear a highly disproportionate amount of the responsibility for planning and executing all the extra fun events that happen around the holiday season. Now, you may not mean this for happen. They don't mean for this to happen. They unconsciously take on a disproportionate amount of the work. We as dads aren't trained to know what that work is. So if we have used the fair play system, this is a great time to get those cards out and really look at who's going to do what for the holidays. But if you don't, then you really definitely need to listen to this episode on step-by-step process for how you can make sure there is equity in the planning of the holiday season, which will result in a much less stressful and happier wife, which of course is happier for everybody and really helps make it a fair and fun holiday for all. You are listening to Dedicated Joe, the new dad's guide on the upending and transformational experience of becoming a father.
We are dedicated.
Hey everyone, happy holidays. For this holiday season, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the sad reality that moms often don't get holidays. This is something that my wife had to really teach me and help me understand. But there is a solution. She also helped me see how I could help her have holiday and make her enjoy it better, as well as therefore I enjoy it better and kids enjoy it better and so forth. Everybody has a better holiday if mom has a better holiday. So what I discovered was that so much of the work of holidays unconsciously falls on women. Presents, decorations, food, travel, packing, cleanup, scheduling, traditions, going to special events, right? These all ended up falling on her. Neither of us chose that consciously, but she just kind of absorbed it. And that caused her to be extra stressed, which is just like, really annoying because I was trying to do the best I could to help. It seemed like she took on all this stuff on herself that nobody asked her to take on. And I would try to help, but it was never enough. And then she would just be stressed out and the holidays would be messed up. And there'd just be this resentment, like her feeling like she had to do it all. I didn't help, and me feeling like I did the best I could and she was not having a good time anyway. So when we asked around, it turns out a lot of couples have this issue, that this is actually a really common experience for women. And it's part of a bigger issue of women doing a disproportionate amount of the household work due to socialization, which the fair play model can fix, which I'll talk about more in this episode. But it just really magnified around the holidays because there's all this extra work and it's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be work. So it's a really kind of ironic thing. So here is the playbook to how we fix this and how you can help your wife have a holiday. First, plan a meeting. You need to schedule time with no kids, with you and your wife, to talk about the holidays. Now, this is best done, a month and a half before, ideally even before Thanksgiving. If you're going to do a lot of Thanksgiving stuff, you could have a meeting where you plan Thanksgiving and Christmas or whatever else you celebrate all at once. Obviously, we've missed Thanksgiving now, so if you're watching this now, it's still not too late to plan the Christmas one, because that's a really big one. So have this meeting, schedule with her, book childcare, like take the initiative to just tell her you want to make sure everything goes smoothly. You want to make sure that you do your part and that she's not stressed out. And, you want to have this meeting to make this. So you hold that, like schedule that meeting. And then you make a list of everything you plan to do. You can do this in advance or during the meeting. Things to include are meals. Which meals are there going to be? Is there travel? What travel? Guests, are you coming or are you staying somewhere else? Presents, who's handling all the presents for your kids, for your extended family? Special events, like if you're going to like view lights or go to a Christmas Carol play or something like that. And then decorations, who's decorating. So starting here really helps align what are equally important to both of you. You both need to kind of decide, what do you both really want to do? And then make sure that therefore, if they're important to both of you, then that the labor is evenly distributed. But if there's something that's not important to either of you, it turns out, skip it. So, for instance, when my wife and I did this, we were talking through all the things there was to do. It's a lot. we realized that wrapping presents from Santa was something that nobody cared about. She's like, "Who's gonna wrap the presents from Santa? You or me?" I was like, "I don't wanna do it." She's like, "I don't wanna do it." We're like, "Oh, why don't we just not wrap the presents from Santa? Just say, 'Look, Santa brought your presents, and they're from Santa.'" So that was an example. There's other things you probably may have been doing or your wife may have thought were important that aren't important, and you could just simplify. Uh, for meals, simplify the menu. This was a big thing for us because my wife, we would have, people over for Thanksgiving or people over for Christmas breakfast or whatever it was. She would have planned like 8 dishes or 9 dishes. Like she went all out for these crazy elaborate meals that nobody needed that many dishes. And then she liked the idea and she wanted it to be really special. But then there's all this extra work and it's so much harder. And then she would be mad that I didn't want to help with like 7 of her 9 dishes. And I was like, we didn't need all these many dishes. So we really simplified. We stripped it down to like 3 or 4 dishes, split evenly between us. Who was doing the shopping? Who was planning it? I made the stuff that I like to make. She made the stuff that she liked to make. And then we asked people to bring stuff, which is people are always happy to bring something, but you have to give them notice. So this was able to like whoever was coming for Christmas breakfast would bring this, or our New Year's pizza party, whatever it was, bring this. And that made it really easy to be like, oh, we'll let them bring that. I'll make this, you make that. And that made the meals go so much simpler. So the fair play system, if you don't already use it, critical to solve this issue of resentment around chores in your life in general. Holiday time is not the time to try to implement fair play. It's a lift of work and energy to put it on. So bookmark this for the new year if you don't have it yet. But it is the only system I have seen that truly creates equality in the home and dramatically reduces the resentment that comes from chores. Now, there's lots of so if you're already using Fair Play, then this is a great time to get those cards out because there's a lot of cards at the holidays that are amplified, but you already own the card. So you start there with who does what. Like, okay, well, there's a packing card, for instance. So I own the packing card for myself and our daughter, and my wife owns her packing card. So we already know the travel for Christmas. I'm going to pack our daughter and I'm going to pack myself and she's going to pack herself and that's done. Right. And so we just kind of reiterate that. There are cards like the meals card or the dishes card that you might not want to take all of the dishes from the holiday meals. And you might want to ask for a guest to help or for you guys to split it or alternate meals or something like that. So you can use the fair play cards as a benchmark for that. But it's not strict because the cards are amplified. So you could kind of negotiate that a little bit, but it's important that you agree on it in advance. Um, so things like booking the travel, things like who is gonna, book it, who's gonna make sure that we check in at the airport or we get to the gate on time, right? Who's gonna get which gifts? We have it set up where I get all gifts for my family. She gets all gifts for her family. And if I don't get any gifts for my family, that's on me. And she doesn't worry about it. She used to try to buy all the gifts for everybody in our lives because she felt that was her responsibility. And we went through this meeting, decided, you know what, like, I know what my family likes, and if I don't get them a gift, it's me they're going to be mad at, not her. So, like, and I could choose to simplify and get fewer gifts or whatever it is. But obviously, gifts for our daughter we share and have to decide who that's going to be. Specific events, who's going to buy the tickets, who's going to add it to the calendar, who's going to pack up the kid and bring the snacks and make sure we make it, right? This level of granularity may seem a little overkill, like, oh, I'll just figure it out. It's fine. We'll just book the thing and we'll just go. And that's how I lived, was like, I always knew that I was just going to do whatever it took to like get us out the door and make it happen. But what I learned was if we didn't have this clear plan and it wasn't clear to her that I was going to do some of that, she would assume it was her responsibility, right? She was just conditioned that if it needs to happen in the family, she's going to be the one who has to do it unless I say I'm going to do it. So that's where this level of granularity really helped her know what I was doing. And then it also eliminates duplication, because if I'm planning to do it and then she thinks she's going to do it and then we both do it or plan to do it, now there's duplication, there's energy lost. And the last thing you want is less time and energy when you're a parent, right? So fair play eliminates duplication and creates cool time for self-care and our what they call unicorn space, which is doing the things you love, time for friends. It's one of the really beautiful things about the fair play model. So that can create that larger in your life. But right now with the holiday season, like try to eliminate duplication by over planning essentially with each other and making it super clear. Now, even if you have a rock solid plan, you have this meeting and you write it all down, guess what? She still may be stressed out, right? Like remember that for years for her and maybe hundreds of years for her female ancestors, this was women's work. This was the woman's job. So she might still continue to assume stuff is hers. She might still worry about things that you said you were going to do. So, there's really no solution to that other than like compassion that this is a new thing and that all you can do is help her remember that you have it. If you see her doing something you agreed to, you could say, hey, remember, I'm handling this, right? And just have compassion that she might be stressed anyway. Don't be like, we've made this plan and now you're stressed. How dare you? Like you have to remember that it's going to take some time for her to remember this. Situations of unfairness, right? That we're combating here, and it's not just going to go away in 1 year. So just plan for that. One cool idea when I asked my wife about this was to, and I'm going to do this for her this year, is to help her have a chill, full, like Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day. Think about what she likes to do. Like for my wife, it's like alone time, like a bath with candles and like music. Different people like different things. You know what your wife likes, or you can ask her. But like planning some special time just for her on those days can really help reduce her stress as she goes into the rest of it. And it also kind of takes her out of that I'm on the giving and service mode this whole holiday. I can receive, I can enjoy. And so plan some kind of special little time. It doesn't have to be hours and hours, but like an hour of alone time for your wife on Christmas Day, like that'll go a long way to helping everybody enjoy Christmas. Happy wife, happy life is for real, like her getting that space will be better for everyone. Um, so one very easy but often forgotten thing is to appreciate her, just thank her for all the work she's done for this holiday, for the family, for the family the whole year. Even if you're evenly divided in this labor and you're doing just as much as she is, it doesn't mean that she doesn't want appreciation for all that she did do, right? Even if you feel like you did a lot, and even if you feel like you want appreciation, still appreciate her. It goes a really, really long way. And, it just is like really helps them feel noticed and feel loved when they're noticed for that effort that they put in. And there's just so much thankless labor that moms do. So thanking them, appreciating them really helps. And you can do this for your mom as well, your aunts, your sisters, like any women in your life would love to be noticed for the fact that they do a lot of powerful work at the holidays to make this all happen. So when we did this for Thanksgiving and Christmas last year, it was a huge game changer. We did it again this year. Massive difference in the stress level and the how much we enjoyed it. And essentially, we got everything we both wanted. My wife got to enjoy it, and that means we all enjoyed it. So this year, give your wife the gift of an equally planned and managed holiday, and essentially be her Santa by doing your part and making a great plan. Have a great holiday and stay dedicated.